24 hours of diplomacy in New York Sunday to Monday, with Iran first invited, then uninvited from those Geneva II peace talks on Syria that open Wednesday. Tehran refusing US-backed preconditions for the talks.
Sitting down without a key player. After the UN withdraws Iran's invitation to the Geneva II peace conference, concerns are being raised as to what can be achieved without the Syrian government's main backer in the region. German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier says Geneva II is useless without Iran, a statement supported by some quarters of the Syrian opposition.
If you are a part of the problem, you must be a part of the solution. And Iran must be involved in these discussions to be a part of the decisions and to respect the result.
Washington applauded the UN's decision. Iran's omission means Syria's main opposition group, the Syrian National Coalition, will now attend the talks, though its biggest bloc, the Syrian National Council, has withdrawn. But on the battlefield, there's little support for the conference. Rebel factions continue to fight against government troops and between each other.
You know, a lot of analysts and even policymakers are not absolutely certain that the talks are going to really lead to a resolution because you know, it's a very bloody conflict. The two sides are pretty well entrenched and really fighting for their respective existence.
Even the Syrian opposition coalition says it's skeptical Geneva II will produce results to the benefit of the country, but says it wants to show it's serious about finding a solution. The international community is keen to put in place a roadmap which would move Syria towards a transitional government. Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is insistent the talks must focus on combating the rebels he calls terrorists.
And that report by Mark Thompson. Let's say hello to François Nicoullaud, former French ambassador to Iran. How are you, sir?
Thank you.
The talks shifting to Switzerland without Iran. I guess the first question to you is, was it a mistake to uninvite Iran?
I don't think this will make such a big difference, frankly. Of course, Iran would have been pleased to be invited for, you know, for demonstrating its influence in the region, to be able to talk with great powers and so on. But, you know, Iran, in fact, in such a game will be a follower of Assad. You know, whatever Assad decide, the Assad regime decide, I mean, Iran will follow. What is more important, what Iran will do after the conference, and what is, if there is a result, I mean, if there is something positive, if something positive comes out of this conference. Of course, this is a big open question.
So let's go through again that 24-hour time stretch, because you're a diplomat, you know that the United Nations doesn't send out an invitation lightly. Many people, when we heard news of it late Sunday, we thought, okay, this way it saves Washington the blushes of having to invite the Iranians. But then on Monday, the Iranians saying, well, we don't accept any preconditions. And then Washington forced to insist that the UN withdraw that invitation.
There has been a misunderstanding. At one point, I believe that at one point, for a short time, at the United Nations, they believed that Iran was accepting the idea of a transitional government, I mean, without formally saying, I mean, we accept the Geneva I communique. At least they were accepting the general outlook, and but this did not last long, and did not last for long. And finally, of course, the truth, the reality, I mean, appeared, and the United Nations had to withdraw their invitation. Yes.
Ambassador Nicoullaud, I'm a little surprised at your first answer, saying it's not going to make much difference. I'll put the question this way.
Yes.
Will the talks be more fruitful with or without Iran?
I believe in all cases, Iran won't be a key player in the talk, because what will happen in Geneva? You will have a meeting, I mean, the first day on Montreux, tomorrow. there will be 30 nations plus the United Nations, and of course it will be a kind of small general assembly. You know, there will be 30 introductory speeches.
There'll be speeches, but not much negotiating.
Not much negotiation. Then there will be an open day where people will negotiate in the corridors of Montreux or Geneva, and serious things will start. Serious things will start, in fact, on Friday. And on Friday, it's a quite restricted format. I mean, you have the opposition, you have the people representative of the Assad regime, you have the United Nations, and that's it. I mean, in the room, the negotiating room, these are the people in the room. Of course, many things will happen around it, but the core of the negotiations really will. I don't believe this will be the moment of truth, you know, and people on the side, won't play such a big role. The question is, can the United Nations convince the opposition, Assad, to organize a transition, and more important, transition towards what? At the moment, one will have to build up a kind of democratic process, and it will come up to election, a new constitution, a new president, a presidential election. What will be the electorate? Because at the moment, in principle, from the present Syrian constitution, there should be a presidential election this year in 2014, and Assad is determined to run this election, to run in the election, to be incumbent in the election. And the first big question is who will vote, because if it's the population, if the Syrian population, people installed in Syria, Assad has a good chance to win. If people abroad, refugees, displaced persons, can vote, you know, in Lebanon, in Turkey, etc., the game is, of course, much more open. And this will be the key of the discussions in Geneva on Friday.
A transition towards what, nobody's really quite sure. But saying transition, in any case, is what got the U.S. and Russia to agree jointly to push for this conference. Russia, whose foreign minister says Iran's absence is a mistake, but not a catastrophe. How is Russia's stake in this different from Iran's?
Well, I don't know. I agree with this statement. It's a mistake, but it's not a catastrophe. And again, it's. I have an inner conviction, but it's difficult to partake it with other people. You know, I believe that Iran, that Russia don't influence Assad so much, you know, and don't influence the regime. They support the regime, but that does not mean that they influence really the political direction. I mean, they don't trade the political direction.
Surely Iran sends military advisors, Russia sends weapons. That's influence.
No, it's support. Support is one thing. Influence, political influence, in really the key decision for the future of Syria, for the future of Egypt, this is another story.
Do you think that the window, we had this sort of period of goodwill where the Americans and the Russians were together on board. Mm-hmm. Is that window going to stay open, or is it going to close after this week of negotiating in Switzerland?
I believe that both of them have to stay on board, and whatever happens. Of course, if the conference, leads to a success, to a plan, to something which leads to a solution. But if it is a failure, they will have to talk together. They will have to go on talking together, and it's diplomacy. Don't have to get discouraged. It's as we can see in the Israeli-Palestinian problem. If you get discouraged at the end of it, you have always to keep on trying.
And just one other question. On Monday, when we were talking about how Iran's invitation was sort of being put on ice and then eventually formally being taken back, meanwhile, in a parallel universe, sanctions were being eased on Iran's nuclear program. Can the two continue to stay completely separate Especially, I'm asking this on the eve of Hassan Rouhani's visit to Davos.
No, that better be kept separate. This is very important. I believe this is the interest of everybody. It's the interest of Rouhani, because Rouhani has a good control on the nuclear negotiation. On the Syrian file, this is another story. There are too many actors within the Iranian regime, the Pasdaran, the special political army, the fundamentalists, and so on, play an important role. And all the cards are not in Rouhani's hands.
But can the major corporations that are going to be speaking with him, the oil companies, the car companies, can they start to do business again with Iran while it's still supporting Assad in Syria?
This is a different story. You have the sanctions attached to the nuclear problem, and the sanctions should be lifted. If one finds a solution to this nuclear file, a nuclear crisis. And the Syrian crisis, which is totally different. This is really everybody intellectually and practically, diplomatically, the two things should be and will be kept separate. I have no doubt about that.
Ambassador François Nicoullaud, I want to thank you for joining us, former French ambassador to Iran. Stay with us. Much more to come here on France 24. We'll have more news and business. We'll be going to Davos at the World Economic Forum. Stay with us.